Agitorium nostrum in nomine Domini, qui fecit caelum et terram. Okay, this is a little brief conference here in Spartantown, New Jersey, on why it is against the faith to put ourselves under modernist Rome, even if it means being recognized without any conditions. And that's the new argument right now, is we can put ourselves now under Rome and be recognized because the Pope isn't demanding any, we don't have to sign anything, we don't have to accept Vatican II in the new Mass, and what's wrong with that? And he's the Pope. After all, we have to acknowledge the primacy of the Pope. So I'm going to cover some principles why this is dangerous to the faith and why it is sinful, as Archbishop Lefebvre warned, to put ourselves under authorities that are crushing the faith. So why? St. Thomas Aquinas says, and I'm drawing this from the study done by the Morgon Fathers, the Capuchins in France, who did a very excellent study, and I'm going to take out just a couple pages from there. So, first, the principle of St. Thomas. It is never permitted to put oneself under the authority of an infidel. So in the political realm, we are under a Protestant, if that, president, right? But that's in the political realm, which is less dangerous than in the Catholic hierarchy. The Catholic Pope and bishops must profess the faith. And this is the point. St. Thomas considers the case of an unfaithful prince, or in our case, president, therefore a leader in the political order. A political leader can easily corrupt the faith of his subjects, yet religion is not the proper object of his government. The proper object of a president or a leader is the common good of the people under him. All the more reason for a religious leader like the Pope to influence, he has a huge influence on the faith of his subjects, because that is the very object of his government. So, consequently, it is never permissible to place oneself under the authority of a faithless or erring religious leader. That's a moral principle. We cannot put ourselves under authority of an unfaithful religious leader. However, a canonical solution given by a neo-modernist pope would necessarily place us under the dependence of an unfaithful religious leader. Therefore, it is never allowed to accept a canonical solution given by a neo-modernist pope. Same as in the case of pluralism. The conclusion is necessary and remains universal. So the conclusion is, on this question of putting oneself under authorities, religious authorities, that don't profess the faith, you put yourself in danger of losing the faith. And pluralism, what is pluralism? It is putting all religions and all ideas and all errors, including with truth, on the same level. So in the level of the state, it would be religious liberty, and in the Catholic Church, with the conciliar church, it's a pluralist system. The perfect example is your average parish. You got a Latin Mass going, you got the children's Mass with puppies and rainbows, you got the Dignity Mass of the LGBTQ, which is an insult to God, and you've got the rock and roll Mass, you've got the Polish polka dance Mass, you've got the Spanish tango dance Mass. All under one bishop, all in one parish. And this is an example of what's called pluralism. All these errors mixed together. So, conclusion. An agreement or canonical solution with a neo-modernist Rome would necessarily make us abandon the fight for the faith. It would necessarily put our faith in grave danger and would be a profession of pluralism. So when we say disagree with Rome, until Rome comes back to sound doctrine and converts to tradition, it is indeed a principle. Because remember in 2012, that was the argument of the superiors in the society. It's a matter of prudence, they were saying. But no, it's really a matter of principle based on the faith. It's a matter of principle. Certainly a principle subordinated to this one. It is never allowed to put oneself under an unfaithful leader, says St. Thomas Aquinas. And two, also, it is never allowed to profess pluralism. It is from these last two principles that it draws all its strength. So let's look at some examples. Firstly, some objections. The first objection, the personal prelature, if Bishop Follet gets this, would protect tradition completely. That's the argument. If Bishop Follet gets this personal prelature, then everything will go okay. And there's no conditions. But remember what Archbishop Lefebvre said. He said this in 1988. If I still live a little, assuming that from here to a certain time Rome wants to begin again discussions, I will set the conditions, he said. I will no longer accept to be in the position we found ourselves in at the discussions with Rome. It is finished. I will ask the question at the doctrinal level. Do you agree with the great encyclicals of the popes who preceded you? Do you, modernist Rome, Pope Francis, Benedict, and all them, do you agree with Quanta Cura of Pius IX? That has the syllabus of errors. Immortali Dei, Libertas of Leo XIII, Pascendi of Pius X. Anybody know what Pascendi condemned? Modernism. Quas Primas of Pius XI. What's Quas Primas about? Anyone?
The Mass.
The Mass? Not directly. Quas Primas dealt, in 1925 he wrote it. It deals with the social kingship of Christ. Humano Generis of Pius XII. Are you in full communion, I will ask, with these popes and their affirmations? Do you still accept the anti-modernist oath? Are you for the social reign of our Lord Jesus Christ? If you, Rome, do not accept the doctrine of your predecessors, it is useless to speak, to discuss. Until you agree to reform the council by considering the doctrine of these popes who preceded you, there is no dialogue possible. It is useless. This would make the positions clear. So you can see Archbishop Lefebvre, up until the day he died, he always held this. And this is where the society leaders were supposed to hold until Rome comes back to tradition. So now that they want this agreement, and I think it's already done, even though it's not publicly announced. So let's look at some of the objections. First, the personal prelature would protect us completely. Answer, who will it protect us from? Against the modernist bishops? Of course, in the best case scenario. But as we have said, the exemption ties us more closely to the Holy See. Once you got a personal prelature directly under the Pope, you're tied in to the conciliar system. Archbishop Lefebvre said in 1988, we must leave this environment of the bishops if we do not want to lose our souls. But this is not enough. It is in Rome that the heresy is installed. If the bishops are heretical, even without taking this term in the sense and with canonical consequences, it is not without the influence of Rome. In other words, an exemption of the bishops is not enough, because one remains in a last resort under the authority of the Holy See. So this is the argument. We won't be under the local bishop, but we'll be directly under Bishop Follet, who's directly under the Pope. But you're still in that system, which Archbishop Lefebvre says is so gravely dangerous to the faith. Autonomy from the bishops would not go so far as to be free totally from the local bishops. Let us take a comparison. And here they give an example, but I can give what's happening in many of the society missions now and priories. They're meeting more with the bishops. They're being on friendly terms with the bishops. They're having dinners with the bishops, wine and cheese. So do you think after a cordial meal with the bishop several times and a golf game, you think those society priests are going to come out publicly and condemn his modernism, condemn his abuses, condemn his scandalous masses? This is the key thing, and it's a communist tactic. Get the opposition to be friendly, dialogue, and then silence them. The second objection, but the Holy See and the Pope are not giving us any conditions for this recognition from Rome. Answer. There are two different ways for Rome to lead us in the wake of Vatican II. The first is to require beforehand the formal adhesion to the Council, Vatican II. That has been the method of the Holy See so far. So kind of the stick. The other method is for Rome to let go of the gravel, to bring about an agreement by small steps, by acts of benevolence, of kindness, and friendliness between the bishops and the society bishops. The aim being to walk together by putting aside the principles. Little by little, one begins to adhere to the principles of the other with whom one is dialoguing. This is already the advice given by Galperin, who was one of the right-hand men of Vladimir Lenin, the communist. He said, "Don't preach atheism. You will scare the people away." This was the error of the Nicolaists. But rather, drag the masses of people to fight for material interests, and you will turn them into atheists. So get the Society of Pius X to worry about canonical recognition. Let's start worrying about, we want to get recognized as we are, and then put the questions of the faith on the back burner. And that's what's happened. For Archbishop Lefebvre, the questions of the faith were always first, right? And this has been the downfall of the conciliar SSPX. But can Rome come to this? Alas, yes. Modernist Rome is capable of this. First, in regards to the acts of benevolence, of all the crumbs they give. Here is what Archbishop Lefebvre thought. Quote, "They want to have us under their direct control and be able to impose on us precisely this anti-tradition policy of which they are imbued. I notice the will of Rome to impose their ideas and their way of seeing on us. They do not grant anything out of esteem for the traditional liturgy, but simply to deceive those to whom they give it and diminish our resistance." That's the key. Diminish our resistance of the Catholic resistance. To sink a hole in the traditional boat in order to destroy it. It's their politics, their conscious tactics. They know what they're doing. They're not wrong, and you know what pressures they exert. They're making tremendous efforts everywhere. As for the Roman overtures to tradition, Archbishop Lefebvre says this, "I don't think it is a real return to tradition. It's like in a battle. When you get the impression that the troops are going a little too far, you hold them back. No, it is somewhat necessary a tactic, as in any combat. This is why what may appear to be a concession, granting the Latin Mass, granting the traditional seminary, and etc., is in reality only a maneuver to achieve detachment from us as much as possible to get the faithful away from Catholic tradition. It is in this perspective that they seem to always give a little more and to go very far. We must absolutely convince our faithful that this is indeed a maneuver, that it is a danger to put oneself in the hands of the conciliar bishops and in the hands of modernist Rome. It is the greatest danger that threatens us. If we have struggled for 20 years, now 43, to avoid conciliar errors, it is not to put ourselves now in the hands of those who profess those errors. So everybody follow the reason of Archbishop Lefebvre. It's a simple principle. The superiors form the inferiors. And that goes for any business, any restaurant business, any mechanical business, any university, any school, any family even. The superior has a tremendous effect on those under him, for good or bad. And all the more for in the church, if the Pope doesn't profess the Roman Catholic faith of tradition, and he accepts errors and heresies, that affects the whole, everyone under him. Next objection, we demand to be accepted as we are. How many times have I heard this from fellow priests of the society? We're just being accepted as we are, so no problem. It has been the condition laid down the same as for La Barroux. La Barroux was the monastery in France, a big Benedictine monastery. Here's Father Bruno, who had to leave this monastery because they went with modernist Rome in 1988. When Rome says to the monastic community, you are accepted as you are, Rome does not think that. Rome thinks in reality, we accept you as you will be, as you will become. The Romans know from experience that when there is an agreement, the whole community will evolve, more or less quickly. So they accept us as we will be in a year, 5 years, 10 years, not as we are today, with our opposition to the new Mass and the Council. We have seen in Article 1 that Rome strives to obtain that even before recognition we become what they want us to be. That is, that we move from the fight for the faith to an attitude of academic discussion on the Council. From that point on, they will no longer have any difficulty in accepting us as we are, or rather as we will be, if we accept this change of attitude. So I know this is kind of subtle, but you got to pay attention to the steps. First, with Archbishop Lefebvre, the Society of St. Pius was fighting for the faith. There was a clear resistance, right? But now Rome and all the discussions with Rome got Bishop Follet to step down and treat the faith as an academic discussion on Vatican II. So this is a big, huge step down to treat Vatican II as an academic subject of discussion, and then shift the focus from the faith to canonical position, canonical recognition, and the good of the SSPX instead of the good of the Church. So that compromise begins the change of the attitude. It's very subtle, and it's a communist tactic. But next objection, and this one is very good because the answer has many examples. Fourth objection, but we will continue to denounce the errors, nothing will change. And I've heard that from many priests too. We're going to continue condemning Vatican II. We're going to continue condemning the new Mass. So what's the problem of just being recognized by modernist Rome? Answer. At the time of recognition, in the best case, hopefully nothing will change. But over time, the exercise of authority eventually corrodes convictions, and this can happen quickly. For example, the Institute of the Good Shepherd, that's the Good Shepherd Institute, which began in 2005 in France. It was Father Laguerre who broke off, and they were going to get recognition from Rome. 2 months after their foundation, they wanted to be, quote, the bearers of good news, and they said the 1970 war is over. 45 years after the Second Vatican Council, we must stop repeating the same doublespeak. In addition, Rome usually starts by imposing what it considers to be minimal requirements and then increases them. For example, when the priests of Campos rallied, that is, in 2003, the Campos Brazil priests made an agreement with Modernist Rome. And Father Violette at the time wrote a great letter of why this was wrong. And it's everything we stand on now. It's the question firstly of the faith, not firstly of canonical problems. For example, so the priests of Campos, when they made their agreement with Rome, Father Cotier, that's Cottier, Father Cotier, rejoiced, adding, he said, little by little it will be necessary to foresee additional steps. For example, that they also participate in the celebration of the new rite. But we must not be in a hurry. We must not rush, Father Cotier says, speaking on behalf of Modernist Rome. The communion found in the Church has its inner dynamism that will mature. He went on to say that this unity, this agreement, this communion with the Apostolic See triggers a whole process. So in other words, once you put your finger in the snake's nest, even if he bites a little bit of the tip of your finger, your whole body gets poisoned. And once you make an agreement with Modernist Rome, once you come under them, that's like getting bit by the snake. Slowly, slowly, you start conforming. And that's what one priest said who went with St. John's in 1997 under Bishop Timlin. One of the priests who left them told me, within months, we didn't have to sign anything. We didn't have to accept Vatican II or the new Mass. But just the pressure of being under Bishop Timlin or a modernist bishop, you start conforming. So he said they started reading the books of John Paul II at the meals. They started doing liturgical changes in the Mass. So he just said automatically you start sliding towards the council. And this is what Pope Benedict XVI also said. He said we must get these rigid traditional groups to slowly abandon their rigid positions and accept the council and the new Mass, the new rite. This was also true, I'm still reading the answer here. This was also true with the Institute of the Good Shepherd. A certain freedom had been given to them at its foundation. They could say the Latin Mass, they can be free to teach in their seminary, etc., etc. During the first canonical visitation in 2012, the Ecclesia Dei Commission deliberated to withdraw from the statutes the mention that the Tridentine Mass was exclusive. So here's the first step. Just change a couple words in the statutes. Moreover, more than on a criticism, even one that is a serious and constructive criticism of the Second Vatican Council, the efforts of the formators, the efforts of the superiors will have to focus on the transmission of the entirety of the Church's patrimony, insisting on the hermeneutics of renewal in continuity, and taking as a support the integrity of the Catholic doctrine exposed by the Catechism of the Catholic Church. So that was imposed on the Good Shepherd Institute, that they had to accept the whole patrimony of the church's tradition. But their tradition includes Vatican II, the new Mass, the new Catechism, the new Code. And they accepted it. That was under Monsignor Pozzo. They accepted it, and they've slid. So, another example. The same process was renewed with the Oasis Sisters of Jesus the High Priest. Now, I visited them in 1988. There was about, 20 holy nuns. And their mission, founded under Father Munoz, a Spanish priest, their mission was to pray for the traditional priests. And they were good. They were really good nuns. But in 2007, they also fell into the trap. Father Munoz asked Rome to give them recognition of their congregation. The constitutions were then approved ad experimentum, with some insignificant alterations. In 2016, for the 50th anniversary of their foundation, the same Bishop Pozzo, Monsignor Pozzo, who visited the Good Shepherd Institute in 2012, granted definite approval for the Oasis Sisters, this time with major changes. There is now no superior general, but each local superior depends on the bishop of the diocese. Thus, she is more vulnerable. The unity of the congregation is compromised. The traditional Mass is no longer the exclusive rite, but the proper charism of the order. It is the entrance into conciliar pluralism. So the point is, once you step into that conciliar world of pluralism and being recognized by superiors that don't have the faith, it's automatic self-destruction. And that we got all these 12 traditional groups who have slid because of this. And that's why, as I just said today or yesterday, in Florida, the parish priest of the Society of St. Pius X Chapel was announcing that Ascension Thursday is no longer a holy day of obligation. You can go on Sunday instead. And that's completely the Navasoto. That's the decision of the National Conference of Bishops, Catholic bishops in the United States. They decided this years ago. So all the holy days of obligation basically are eliminated, and it's just a Sunday Mass. And now the society is biting into this. And that's just one step of the many downsides to prove the agreement of Rome. Even though it's not publicly announced, it's already done. And then, of course, St. Peter's Society. As far as ecumenism is concerned, the Fraternity of St. Peter dedicated the November 2004, February 2005 issue to S. Petrus to justify the scandal of Assisi, and in general, to justify interreligious dialogue. The same review from the St. Peter's in 2007 justified the prayer of Pope Benedict XVI in the mosque in Istanbul. So remember, Pope Benedict XVI went to the mosque, he took off his shoes, he faced Mecca, he didn't make the sign of the cross, he hid his pectoral cross. Remember that? He never made the sign of the cross. That was a massive scandal. That was 2006, under the so-called conservative Pope. And St. Peter's was justifying this. Father Basil of Labourou also wrote the two books in 2013 to justify conciliar ecumenism. And Archbishop Lefebvre specifically mentions that, their justification of ecumenism and religious liberty. The Good Shepherd Institute is silent on the Pope's ecumenical scandals. But Father Tanoran, he spoke, but in defense of the meeting of Assisi in 2011. Ecumenism, religious dialogue, and religious freedom are monstrosities which utterly insult the adorable Trinity. One cannot in any way say that these are little concessions. It is the whole foundation of our fight that is ruined. And you could add all these groups that have slid with Conciliar Rome and now the new SSPX. It all starts with little steps. So remember the step. The strong resistance steps down to let's discuss, let's have dialogue, and let's discuss canonical solutions. That step itself is already a huge downfall. And that happened in 2012 in the Society. The General Chapter Statement of 2006 said we can have no agreement with modernist Rome until Rome comes back to tradition. That was very clear. 2012 it was changed to the words are we now approve and we approve the eventual canonical normalization with Rome. So in 2012, the Society took the very steps that all these other groups took, which is no longer primarily the defense of the faith and Christ the King, but now let's get recognized, let's get canonical solutions, and then they slide from there. And now in Campos, Brazil, they're saying the new Mass with altar girls and giving communion in the hand. So it's very, very serious, this war we are in, and we can't waver. As Archbishop Lefebvre never wavered himself, we can't waver with these destroyers of the faith. And let me just close by one more quote from Archbishop Lefebvre. And he talks about the silencing. Yes, in 1984, to those who wanted to take advantage of the indult to be reintegrated into the official church, in order to change things from within, as they put it, Archbishop Lefebvre replied. So that's 1984. Now it's 2012. This is what the Society is saying. We can get into the church and convert it from within. And that's what St. Peter said in 1988. We'll get approval, and then we'll swing the church to tradition. Archbishop Lefebvre said, it is a false reasoning. We don't fit into a framework under superiors, even though they have everything in their hands to restrain us. Once recognized, you say, we will be able to act within the church. It is a profound error and total ignorance of the minds of those who make up the actual hierarchy. We cannot place ourselves under an authority whose ideas are liberal and which would lead us little by the force of things to accept these ideas and their consequences. First of all, the new Mass. Archbishop Lefebvre says again, putting oneself inside the church, what does that mean? And first of all, which church are we talking about? If it is the conciliar church, we have fought against this for 20 years because we want to stay Catholic. We would have to enter into this conciliar church to supposedly make it Catholic from within. It's a total illusion. It's not the subjects that make the superiors, it's the superiors that make the subjects. So those are some very important points among many brought out by Archbishop Lefebvre. So the bottom line is we see really very sadly, we see the bishops of Archbishop Lefebvre. Which one of them, can anyone name one of them that's holding the very line of Archbishop Lefebvre? And what about the three consecrated by Bishop Williamson? Are any of them publicly holding the line of Archbishop Lefebvre? So then no. And I will rejoice on the day when one actually does, if not all. But this is the terrible crisis we are in now. So it's Vatican II Part B, Part C now, that we are suffering through. So we got to be patient in this battle. We got to keep praying that Our Lady give us a good Pope. We got to keep praying for these bishops of tradition to do their duty. We don't despise them. We don't certainly not condemn them, but we condemn their errors, and we have to. And I've been told by fellow priests, just be quiet and work with Bishop Williamson. Just be quiet and stop making waves and just work with him. At least you're going to have a valid bishop and you're going to have sacraments and holy oils. But if I take, or any priest, that position, we compromise by silence. There are several ways. There's about, how many ways? I think 11 ways to cooperate in sin. And one of them is obviously by silence. And these are not small errors to say that if the new Mass nourishes your faith, Isabella, if the new Mass nourishes your faith, can you go to it? Brian, can you go to the new Mass if you find personal fulfillment of faith in the new Mass? No, you can't, because it's objectively wrong. It's objectively poisonous. And that's why Archbishop Lefebvre condemned it. And that's why he said, I can never form priests on the new Mass. So, anyway, I still have the recorder on. Does anybody have any questions that might help other souls that would be listening to this somewhere else?
Stay away from all of them.
All of who?
All of the ones who don't follow what Archbishop Lefebvre said, because it's a spider's web. Rome is a spider's web. The minute you touch a little corner of it,
you're right.
You are taken by the web.
That's right.
Stay away.
That's true. That's true. You boys ever throw ants into a spider's web? No. Try it sometime. We used to do that as little kids. Take the big carpenter ants, throw it in the big spider's web, and wherever it lands, even if it's on the edge, the spider immediately runs and wraps it up and stings it and numbs it. Try it, you'll see. And that's exactly what modernist Rome does. And we can't put ourselves under these authorities under obedience until Rome professes what Archbishop Lefebvre said, the kingship of Christ, the syllabus of errors, the anti-modernist oath, all the doctrine of Catholic tradition. So we got to fight on, and this is where God wants us. So we are glorifying God right now, holding the faith, keeping the rosary, being faithful. That's where God wants us now. And this is how we're going to become saints. This is how you sanctify your soul now. All of us. It's very unusual that a priest travel all over, but we're forced to do this now. It's very unusual that Bishop Lefebvre and the 4 bishops, until they slid into the compromise, traveled all over the world. It's very unusual. But these are anything but usual, normal times.
All of the SSPX priests at the beginning traveled all the time.
Yes, that's right.
It wasn't unheard of to have a priest say 4 masses in one day.
Yes. And I've been told in Australia, in one of the parishes, the priests who used to go out on Sunday afternoon and do mass circuits, now they're all together Sunday afternoon meeting with the local diocesan bishops over wine and cheese. So that's a deadly friendship indeed.
Father, isn't it true, though, that Bishop Blay signed the doctrinal declaration? He signed it and sent it to Rome.
Yes.
Isn't that a confirmation that he's withdrawn? He's compromised at that very moment, back in 2012. Yes. Whether he made it publicly or not, publicly it was sent.
Yes. And the proof of that is that it really is, to me, that's the agreement, because it's all doctrinal.
Exactly.
But the proof is, as I've said to many priests, because they say, well, it's a dead document. Then I tell them, get up next Sunday and condemn the doctrinal declaration. Do that. And they say, oh, well, I don't want to make waves. And because if it's condemned, there should be no problem condemning it from the pulpit.
Even before 2012, they were not condemning Vatican II any longer. They were already starting to pull back from speaking out against the Vatican and their errors.
Yeah.
And we noticed that.
Yes, I know. So keep praying, and We'll say a little prayer. I'll give everyone a blessing and we'll close there. In the name of the Father, Son, and the Holy Ghost. Amen. Hail Mary, full of grace, the Lord is with thee. Blessed art thou among women, and blessed is the fruit of thy womb, Jesus.
Holy Mary,
Mother of God,
pray for us sinners.
Our Lady, crusher of all heresies.
Pray for us.
Our Lady of Fatima.
Pray for us.
Saint Joseph, terror of demons.
Pray for us.
Saint Pius X, crusher of modernism.
Pray for us.
Saint James, slayer of Muslims.
Pray for us.
Benedictio Dei omnipotentis. Patris et Filii et Spiritus Sancti, et vos semper. Amen.
Father.